नमस्कार। कार्यक्रम सामाजिक न्यायमा म प्रस्तुता रूप सुनार यहाँहरू सम्पूर्णलाई हार्दिक स्वागत गर्न चाहन्छु। आदरणीय दर्शक महानुभावहरू, यस कार्यक्रममा हामी ऐतिहासिक उत्पीडन र विभेदमाथि प्रश्न गर्छौं। समसामयिक अर्थ राजनीतिक तथा सामाजिक विषयवस्तुहरूमाथि दलितका दृष्टिकोणबाट छलफल गर्ने गर्छौं अनि जातमा आधारित असमानता र विभेदको अन्त्यका सम्भावनाको खोजीहरू गर्ने काम गर्छौं। आदरणीय दर्शक महानुभावहरू, आज हामी अम्बेडकर र उनको विरासतका बारेमा कुरा गर्नेछौँ। यहाँहरू सबैलाई थाहा छ, प्रत्येक वर्ष अप्रिल 14 का दिन अम्बेडकर जयन्ती मनाइन्छ र यस वर्ष पनि 130औं जन्म जयन्ती मनाइयो। यहाँहरू सबैले जानेकै कुरा हो, अम्बेडकर एक नामुद अर्थशास्त्री, राजनीतिज्ञ, प्राज्ञ र प्रभावशाली वकिल थिए। तर हाम्रो समाजमा भएको जुन जात व्यवस्था छ, त्यो जात व्यवस्थाले उनको यो बृहत जुन परिचय छ, त्यो परिचयलाई सङ्कुचन पारेर दलित समुदायको नेता या प्राज्ञ भनेर खुम्चाइदिएको अवस्था छ। भलै उनले जात व्यवस्थामा जति काम गरे, त्यो काम आजका दिनसम्म अरू कसैले गर्न सकेको छैन। जुन दक्षिण एसियामा रहेको जात व्यवस्था छ, जात व्यवस्थालाई मिहिन ढङ्गले समाजशास्त्रीय र मानवशास्त्रीय दृष्टिकोणबाट उनले व्याख्या र विश्लेषण गरेका छन् र त्यसकै आधारमा आज जे जति छलफल, बहस र अध्ययन अनुसन्धान भइरहेका छन्, त्यो उनले गरेको जुन एउटा अध्ययन छ त्यसको विस्तारित रूप हो भन्दा अत्युक्ति हुँदैन होला। आज हामी अम्बेडकर र उनको विरासतका बारेमा कुरा गर्नेछौँ र संवादका लागि हामीसँग हुनुहुन्छ प्राध्यापक प्रशान्त नेगी। प्राध्यापक प्रशान्त नेगी दिल्ली स्थित जामिया मिलिया इस्लामिया विश्वविद्यालय अन्तर्गत रहेको डाक्टर केआर नारायण सेन्टर फर दलित एन्ड माइनोरिटिज स्टडिजसँग आबद्ध हुनुहुन्छ र उहाँसँग हामी आज यस विषयमा कुरा गर्नेछौँ। प्रशान्तजी, वेलकम टु सोशल जस्टिस।
Thank you, Ruchi. It's my pleasure to be there.
At the very beginning, could you please introduce yourself, especially your involvement in study and teaching of Ambedkar and his work?
My name is Prashant Negi, and I presently am at the Dr. Narayanan Centre for Dalit and Minorities Studies at Jamia Milia Islamia University, India. I have been involved in the teaching of Dalit studies for almost 15 years now, and my association with caste studies started when I enrolled at the Jawaharlal Nehru University for my master's degree, in which we are exposed to a course on social stratification in India. Thereupon, as I pursued my higher degrees, I started working with the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies. In fact, I was one of its earliest employees, and subsequently I joined as an assistant fellow, but when I left Indian Institute of Dalit Studies, it was because I got selected into the university, and I at that time was the editor and associate fellow at the Dalit Studies Institute. It was basically the Dalit Studies Institute and Professor Sukhdev Thorat who spearheaded a sort of subaltern initiative into Dalit studies that exposed me into the world of caste, and we started understanding how caste plays an important role in everyday social life in South Asia, and how caste leads to multiple marginalities, those of obviously of social inequality, economic inequality, and even cultural inequality. So that was my foray into caste studies, and thereupon from that time I've been teaching various courses on caste in the university. We were one of the foremost centers in India to start a course on social exclusion and inclusive policy. In fact, we had started that course even before the University Grants Commission had conceptualized them. They had conceptualized these courses somewhere around 2007, and around 2010-12, and we were already teaching it a year before. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, our center at Dalit Studies at Jamia was one of the nodal centers on studies on caste and social exclusion in India. And from that time, we've been, designing courses, understanding various facets of caste discrimination and untouchability, working on theoretical models, undertaking various projects, consultancies, etc. And it's I've been in Jamia now almost for 13 years. So that's basically my association with caste studies and till now.
Okay, so you have been into various universities in India, including Jawaharlal Nehru University and Jamia Milia Islamia University, where you have been teaching at the moment, right? So the academic discourse on castes seems very vibrant in India, and how the caste system is being taught and perceived in the academia there.
Initially, for a very long period of time, caste was basically caste studies were limited to two disciplines in India. You can say that sociology was one of them and political science was another. So for a very long period of time, caste studies were dominated by these two disciplines in India. And it was somewhere later during the 80s that basically subaltern studies as a separate discipline or a separate thought within these disciplines started emerging. And thereupon, when there was during the 2005, 6, 7, that decade, we saw that special emphasis was put by various academicians and various universities into caste studies in India. And one of the initiatives was at that time led by late Professor Mushirul Hasan, who was the Vice Chancellor of Jamia Milia Islamia. I must bring it on notice that it was his foresight that he imagined within the university various interdisciplinary centers which could study issues of Dalits and minorities. And that is when our center was conceptualized and established. And thereupon, the University Grants Commission took up the issue of various centers on marginal social groups, and social exclusion and inclusive policy was one such initiative. The difference being that in the traditional departments like sociology and political science, caste studies were undertaken as a part of the sociology of social stratification or the theoretical models on political science. But as such, they studied caste, its various facets, but it was not. It could not be that in depth as it is at the moment, because these centers are specifically studying caste discrimination or marginality related to social exclusion. So these centers have an advantage in a sense that they are interdisciplinary. Their faculties are drawn from various disciplines, and they have the advantage of understanding important structural dimension of the Indian society or the South Asian society in a holistic and a broader context. And also another fundamental difference which I feel is that the interdisciplinary nature of these centers brought to the table various specializations which became cutting edge. For instance, like the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies was working on official statistics, and these official statistics were all disaggregated. They existed in the public domain, but they were disaggregated. So a data bank was thought of there, and a data bank was created aggregating all kinds of official data related to the scheduled castes and their comparison with other social groups in India. What that did was that it was basically a response to the United Nations conference against xenophobia and other forms of associated discrimination at Durban in 2001, when the Indian Dalit organizations had participated and had raised the banner of caste discrimination to be included within the UN ambit. And the United Nations had then called them to present findings, empirical findings on how caste is discriminatory, and they found that knowledge paradigm was limited to their advocacy at that particular moment of time. So the Dalit Studies Institute filled in that lacuna. It also lobbied and advocated within the academia that that these are the nature of discrimination, for instance, in employment, in public sector employment, in health, related to education and access to civic amenities, any major dimension of human development. And also they were able to present in the form of their writings, books, working papers, other publications that the basically bringing into the public domain the voice of the voiceless and subaltern studies, which had a quantitative dimension but was explained qualitatively. Mm-hmm. And the difference being that that in the traditional departments for a very long period of time, caste studies were based on field models, for instance, like those undertaken by M.N. Srinivas and other sociologists. And these field models were they explained caste as a qualitative phenomena. But here we have academicians working on quantitative models and presenting a qualitative analysis of the same, which is very relevant for policy making and understanding the multiple nature of deprivation that the Dalits face in South Asia.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Ambedkar now. He is an economist, politician, intellectual, and of course an eminent lawyer, right? But we have become so bigoted and narrow that all these accomplishments are reduced to Dalit intellectual, right? So how the world has perceived his work after 6 decades of his passing away, 6 decades down the line?
Yeah, thank you. It's quite an interesting question. When it's very relevant that you ask that, because this question was being debated during the time Ambedkar was advocating for social equality and egalitarianism. Mm-hmm. In fact, the mainstream nationalist movement at that particular moment of time also considered Ambedkar to be a sectional politician or a sectoral politician, representing the interests of a section of people, but not that of the entire nation. So and Ambedkar himself, if you read about him and his work, he was sometimes right of the center, and his politics and ideology was right of the center, and at the other times it was radically left, so left of the left. So he was not an intellectual, or he was not a politician or a jurist who was limited by an ideological agenda. He tried to understand the Indian society, and especially related to caste discrimination and untouchability. He wrote extensively, his work on Who Are the Shudras, or Annihilation of Caste, and other volumes on caste are still regarded as one of the basic basic readings on caste, if you have to, if I may say so. So and also we must understand that Ambedkar, by the age of 30, had accumulated so much of cultural capital, so much of education that others within the academia or elsewhere can only dream of. Mm-hmm. He already had a PhD. He was one of the first people from his Magar community to actually go to Elphinstone College in Mumbai and gain a master's degree. Thereupon he went to Columbia University and did his doctorate. Then he came back to the United Kingdom and he was awarded the DSc, which is the Doctor of All Sciences. And he is one of the first people to have been awarded Doctor of All Sciences, and it is, I believe, a difficult degree to accumulate. And on top of that, he was also, involved with the nationalistic movement, understanding caste, writing on caste. He was an accomplished. He even gained a law degree. So, by the time he came back to India, he was an intellectual in his own capacity. He was writing extensively. He was also mobilizing support of the Dalit community against caste discrimination. He was actively lobbying within the Indian national movement the interests of the Dalits in India. And when in 1919 the South Borough Committee had come to India, he was also lobbying with them for separate electorates and reservations for the scheduled castes. So his accomplishments just cannot be reduced to him representing a particular section of the people. In fact, it is, I believe, that Indian social history can be divided before Ambedkar and
after Ambedkar,
and pre-Ambedkar and post-Ambedkar, because he tried to understand and bring forth a social problem of inequality, inegalitarianism, social justice within within the imagination of the so-called Indian. And it is, and he also founded the Republican Party of India. So then he becomes the first law minister of India. He was also, prior to that, he is the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution, in which, because of his holistic understanding of caste and caste marginalization, that specific articles and specific provisions were inserted into the Constitution of India, thereby making them applicable to each citizen of India overnight. And if you are to see the relevance of Ambedkar in modern India, then one must realize that Ambedkar's agenda continues even today. He is remembered each time for his accomplishments, and also, almost all kinds of ideologies and political ideologies seem to appropriate him. So at one time, some of them continue to believe that he is a sectoral, sectional politician, but in modern India, owing largely to the fact that the Dalits in India are now, according to I think the 2021 census, there'll be somewhere around 22 to 25% of the total Indian population. So everybody attempts to appropriate Ambedkar. He has been awarded the Bharat Ratna posthumously. And recently, when Columbia University, his alma mater, was preparing a list of its students who made a difference globally, I believe they included Ambedkar among the top 5. So he is I think Ambedkar's work cannot be reduced to him just belonging to a particular section of the society, but he is for all of us to appropriate.
Okay, I would further like to have some discussion on his political involvement. There is a discourse going on in Nepal as to think beyond the imagination of Dr. Ambedkar. No doubt, he has exceptionally diagnosed the caste system and offered some concrete prescription to the annihilation of caste. Right? Some Dalit leaders in Nepal think that Ambedkar failed to give a political shape. What is your take on that?
I think that would be just not a complete answer to the kind of work that he did. But I believe that Ambedkar was. You also have to contextualize a particular individual in its contemporary social reality. You have to look at an individual and his efforts and his morality and ethics towards giving back to the society in a particular cultural social dimension. At the time when Ambedkar was being educated, he was basically studying on scholarships. Incidentally, he was the first Dalit to be educated at Elphinstone College in Mumbai when he was doing his masters. So he overcame social hurdles to actually educate his own self and then understand and contextualize the problems of caste discrimination. And he spoke about them, he wrote about them, he created a sort of a social mobility and organization within the Indian context. And then he went on to contextualize the same in the constitution and then in governance. So to actually have to play such a bigger role for an individual, and is basically I think it's not less than phenomenal. But within the context of the South Asian movement for social mobility, the problem is again of you have to contextualize it in a very regional, localized context. So when he was doing his mobilization, there were also I believe people were learning from him. People were trying to understand the problems of caste and organize themselves. Because if you look at what he said, that you organize, agitate, and educate. So the nara that he gave, how relevant it becomes for an individual who faces multiple forms of marginality to actually gain social mobility. So in an academic discourse, it is especially in terms of the theory of social exclusion and inclusive policy, we lay a lot of emphasis on how to reduce intergenerational aspects of marginality and how social mobility can be gained by empowering one's own self. And there is no other way of empowering an individual except education. So I think his message was loud and clear for all the socially marginalized people. In fact, there are parallels being drawn now between his work and that of the Black movement, and that how the Black Panther movement in the United States and how the Dalit movement in India have parallels. And similarly, I believe that that each movement, wherever it might be located, though it might be in Nepal or it might be in any other progressive nation, also learns and adapts accordingly.
So it creates a kind of foundation for transnational movement.
Yes, we tend to learn from each other, and we tend to learn from the experiences of others, and we try to contextualize them into our own movements and into our own morality and ethics. For instance, if you look at these aspects theoretically, if you look at the fact that that social inequality, the tryst for social justice, these are all based on very philosophical models of say justice and that of fairness of treatment, and equality is itself has multiple dimensions. For instance, that of formal equality and that of substantive equality. So all these predicates are philosophical. And we continue to borrow from them, and we continue to learn from them, and we continue to contextualize and adapt and respond accordingly.
So Prashantji, I want to learn a little bit more about the psyche of the Indian society at the moment. There is a narrative that what is happening with Dalit is their problem, right, rather than a human problem. So what do you see the common conscience of the Indian society? Is caste endangering everyone? Does Indian society perceive it that way?
Sociologically and academically speaking, like caste is one of the major pillars of the Indian society, and it is indeed one of its definitive structural systems. And because it is a form of social organization, how a particular dominant section of the Indian population organize themselves, so indeed it is a structural dimension of the Indian society. And because of the nature of hierarchy within the caste system and the nature of ritualism within the religion, there are the manner in which it exhibits itself becomes discriminatory, because there is graded hierarchy within all the four varnas. And because of these forms of hierarchy, there are debilitating dimensions for the Dalits per se. And so the discourse is at various levels. The discourse is like at the policy level and at the level of governance, because that is basically where I'll go back to the last question that you had asked. Like when we are looking at when we are a democracy, the democracy is based on distributive justice. It cannot be based on promotion of one section of the population over the other. So the Constitution of India, from where the governance or the executive, legislative, and the judiciary draw their powers, it is based on a foundation which is like based on equality. And then when we are talking about a particular section of the people, then the state cannot treat them differentially. State is duty bound to treat a section of any section of the population equally. So equal laws for all the citizens of the country. Justice is distributed equally. In the eyes of the law, everybody is equal. But that is at the level of that is at a formal level. So that is where we make a distinction between equality which is formal and equality which is substantive. So at a formal level, everybody is equal, but at a substantive level, because of the manner in which caste discrimination plays out, there are theoretical models of, for instance, that of social closure, which say that a particular section of the people, they tend to appropriate almost all kinds of capital for their own selves. So Max Weber had conceptualized this concept of social closure. And in these Weberian contexts, like when we are looking at substantive equality, then we find that that a particular social group tends to accumulate more than another, and these kinds of disparities are apparent in statistical analysis of various social groups. And for instance, like if you're looking at education, or if you're looking at health, or if you're looking at any key human development indicator of income, we find that the scheduled castes or the Dalits in India are lagging behind. There are they tend to be concentrated in lower categories of employment as well. So they tend to be less in decision-making processes and more in occupations which are considered to be unclean and polluted. For instance, related to cleaning or basically the class 4 category or group D category of jobs, as they are called in India. So it's very interesting to note that their participation in employment in the public sector employment in group D category of jobs exceeds even their proportion of population. So if they are somewhere around 24-25% of the Indian population presently, their share in Group D public sector jobs is almost 36 to 38%. So which means that that they tend to be they are somehow concentrated in jobs which are related to their caste status, and then so one aspect is then when we are looking at the substantive aspects of caste discrimination or substantive aspects of equality, then we have to the discourse changes again. So it is incumbent upon the democratic traditions, or incumbent upon the governments of the day, to include the excluded in policy discourses. And at the same time, there is a very vibrant Dalit movement in India. It raises issues of various issues related to caste marginality, or at various points of time. Caste is being taught within the academia. Caste is being written about. In fact, when you are if you go to JSTOR and if you type caste in JSTOR, the amount of articles that appear on caste are just mind-boggling. So it is an aspect of Indian society which is definitive, which is overarching, and very relevant. It is not just politically relevant just because the scheduled castes are almost 1/4 of the Indian population, but it is also socially and culturally relevant because caste is a form of social organization as well. And so we have caste being understood differently in, for instance, in the urban areas and in the rural areas. Rural areas more so because rural areas are characterized by peer pressure and also by social organization which is based on community, and where people's caste identities are well known. So the forms of discrimination as they exist in the rural areas differ from those in urban areas, where people have people do not have that kind of a peer pressure or of community living, just because of the nature of urbanization and individuality. So when you're answering this question, you have to again look at it in terms of a layer, or you can look at it in terms of an onion which has various rings to it. And when you peel each layer, you understand the aspect in a different dimension. So while in India caste is an important and a salient factor of the Indian society, but at the same time the responses to caste from the political side, or from the academia, or from the social side are as many as writings on it.
Okay.
But at the same time also there is some section which continues to believe that the affirmative action programs for the scheduled caste need to end, and it is basically a contested and a debated issue, and there are no easy answers for it.
We can have a discussion on that later on in our next issue, but we are almost at the end of our interview, and my final question to you is, how does the existing BJP government recognize Dr. Ambedkar? Because yesterday I was going through the Twitter of Indian Prime Minister, so I find some hypocrisy in his words and actions on time. So how do you see that angle?
It's like I told you, Dr. Ambedkar's work is it cannot be reduced, or it's because it's the essence of his work is about human dignity and equality. So to reduce him as a voice of a particular section of the population, or of the marginalized, is inappropriate. If you look at the history of social welfare, or if you look at the history of distributive justice or democratic traditions, even if you go right to the Plato republics, you will see that justice has to be distributed equally, and it's over history or over various traditions. Each tradition has the moral and ethical responsibility of talking about the marginalized or the excluded, and his work is salient to almost all political traditions. And BJP and the present government, I do not feel is far removed from that. In fact, initially, there were some talks when the government had come to power for the first time. There were some talks of the affirmative action being rethought of, but when again see, the thing is when specialized scholars or specialized academia is working on various aspects of marginality, and when it brings to the public domain certain facets of caste distancing or discrimination, then for policy making, normally they are accepted. We have multiple reports or multiple agencies of the government of India which work on collecting or collating data, like for instance the Census of India, the National Family Health Survey, the Crime in India report, Rural Labor Inquiry report, the National Sample Survey. And these are agencies which collect data on a decadal basis, on 5-year basis, on annual basis, and their data is considered to be one of the most authentic, officially authentic sources of data. So when, for instance, we are working on, say, we worked on a book called The Dalits in India, in which we looked at 27 parameters of Dalit discrimination and social disparity. So we were able to bring to the public domain, that this is the nature of this particular social group in India at this moment. We aggregated data from independence to the present day, and it showed large-scale disparities between various social groups and the scheduled castes in India. So that if there was any double talk related to the Dalits or the scheduled castes in India within the present government, then you wouldn't have seen Dr. Ambedkar being appropriated by the present government as well. So their initiatives for affirmative action would have been rethought of, or their initiatives would have been different. But we see that various voices have come from the government. In fact, Ramdas Athawale, who's the leader of the Republican Party of India, founded by Ambedkar, he himself was a part of the BJP government and as a Minister for Social Justice. And interestingly, he never found a place within the previous governments or so-called secular governments led by the Congress party. So various spaces are provided at the same time by various political ideologies. I believe that that it is the salience of caste and the salience of the community as such which dominates the political and social, cultural, and the academic space in India. And it's not limited to a particular political ideology.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, Prashantji, for your time and sharing your thought with us.
Thank you, Roopji. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.